For those who aren't familiar with my work, I've proven that most chronic illnesses, most things that we deem as mental illness, and a lot of even addiction is driven by parasitic infections. And I'm not sure people really comprehend the level of fraud and corruption it takes to suppress this information from the general public. It's pretty intense. The government involvement, the media involvement, obviously the medical and scientific fraud, and it just goes on and on. It's pretty mind blowing. But I want to talk about, as I'm reflecting, I want to talk about a few of the medical professionals and behavioral health professionals that I've seen in my adult life. Try to maybe connect some dots that are there. Maybe not. So, when I was going to Boston University, I'm pretty sure I was 20 years old when I went to Mass General Hospital and saw a neurologist and had my first sleep study done. This was the first time I was diagnosed with restless leg syndrome, bruxism, periodic limb movement disorder, and some other things by this neurologist. It was very interesting. The first time I met him, he's like, do you ever get these creepy crawly sensations on your legs? I was like, well, yeah, I do. He's like, Anyways, interestingly, I said I was diagnosed with PLMD, RLS, and bruxism, and all these other things. I've proven that all of these conditions are due to parasitic infections, and it's much more diabolical than that. But interestingly, one of the medications this medical doctor at Harvard's training hospital, a very highly respected gentleman in the name of medicine, prescribed me was a dopamine agonist. Now, since these conditions are due to parasites, and parasites thrive off of dopamine, if you're giving a medication that spikes up a person's dopamine, then that's going to make the parasitic infections more severe. Now, one interesting thing about this gentleman, and I'm not drawing any inferences here, I'm just pointing it out, is that he was Jewish. I'm just making note of that. I'm sure there's nothing there, but then, I kind of want to think about some other medical doctors that I've seen over the years, and in people in the field of psychology and research and such. So I was going to graduate school at the University of Colorado Boulder. My first year in the PhD program, I had high hopes. I was anyways. And one of my professors made a bold statement in one of our lectures, middle of the first semester, to our incoming class of 6 doctoral students in clinical psychology. He said that, and he is one of the most world-renowned experts in bipolar disorder and got his research started in schizophrenia. He's a big name. And he's a published author and all these other things, not just in research, but for the common people. And he made a bold statement that there are no pathogenic causes to schizophrenia when we were learning all about all the mental health conditions and all this other stuff. And this was 2007. And he said it was basically a gene by environment by stress reaction that causes schizophrenia in people. And I raised my hand and I corrected him because I had personal knowledge. In 2007 because I suffered a very severe ocular toxoplasmosis infection in my late teens. And I corrected him. I said, there's toxoplasmosis, which is a protozoan parasite, can cause schizophrenia. There's a very enormous relationship between the two. He's like, oh, well, I don't know that. Now that I reflect, not only did this man know that, he knew that the entire mental health narrative is bullshit. That almost all these medical conditions or all these psychiatric conditions in the DSM are due to parasites or trauma. or directed energy weapons, but mostly parasites. And but he played dumb. He played dumb, and but interestingly, and I'm not drawing any inferences here. I'm just pointing out something that's undeniable: is that this professor, esteemed professor, and expert in clinical psychologist, was Jewish. No, I'm not drawing any inferences. I'm just saying he's Jewish. Then there was, I taught in either my second or third year in graduate school, abnormal psychology, and I was the TA, the teaching assistant, the graduate teaching assistant, where I taught. It was a class of 40, and where the main lecturer was an adjunct faculty member. Meaning that she wasn't directly on the faculty, but she held a PhD in clinical psychology. She was terrible teacher. Students hated her, but she taught the students 3 hours a week, and then I, in a class of 40 people, and then I had taught the students 2 hours a week. I had two different sections that broke up. I'd have 20 students for 2 hours one day, and then another day I'd have the other 20 students another 2 hours. Students didn't learn anything from this woman. She was late all the time. She just was not impassioned, and she would just say a lot of things that were wrong, and I would correct her when she was really wrong. Now that I reflect, she knew the entire time that the mental health narrative is bullshit, and that most of these conditions are due to parasites. I remember she proudly showed before and after pictures, like mugshots of people that had been arrested before they started using meth and after, and all the skin damage and all the teeth damage and all that other stuff, blaming it on the drug. Well, it's not quite that simple, ladies and gentlemen. That's all that skin damage, all that teeth damage is from parasites. Now, the drug makes the parasites go crazy and go hyperactive and cause extensively more damage. But it's not the drug doing the damage, it's the parasites on the drugs, on the meth, that are doing the damage. I didn't know this at the time, but, I'm just highlighting how she's been pushing all these false narratives and stuff. And she made my life very, very difficult because I would correct her when she said things that were wrong. And if you challenge the narrative, the mental health narrative, or any of the bullshit, you're going to get a target on your back. And I'm not making any inferences here, but I just want to point out that she is Jewish. Just a coincidence, I'm sure. I'm sure there's nothing to it. I'm sure there's nothing to it that these three people so far have been Jewish. So shortly after that, and she tried to get me ousted from graduate school, and my students loved me. They gave me perfect evaluations. They gave her terrible evaluations. She tried to blame all the problems on me, but obviously the data said different, and the students said differently. Anyways, so now I had to leave graduate school, so now I have disabling chronic illnesses, brain fog, depression, chronic fatigue, and just like I'm in bad shape. So here I am. I had to move back in with my parents. So I moved back to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I'm in pure hell, right? I'm in pure hell. So I went to go see a neurologist about my brain fog and my sleep issues and my energy issues, right? Seems like a reasonable place to go, see a neurologist about all this. And, he did a sleep study after I've had many sleep studies in my life, going all the way back to the first doctor I'm telling you about, that have all shown very severe sleep disorders. He said, "Oh, you have no sleep disorders. There's nothing wrong with you at all." And then he put his hand on my back after having a little conversation. And he said, "Greg, some people just need more sleep than others." And then he guided me with his hand towards the door. And I'm like, what a response. Well, it turns out that all of these issues were due to parasitic infection right here in my frontal lobe that I eventually ended up curing with the liposomal luteolin, specifically brain gain, decreasing the chronic inflammation in my brain from parasitic infection. And I'm sure this neurologist was well aware that this was due to parasites. And I'm not drawing any inferences here. I'm just pointing out that this man was Jewish. He's no longer with us, but this neurologist was Jewish. And then I ended up going and having a primary care doctor in Santa Fe a couple of years after that. And I had all this skin damage on my legs and stuff. Just like, of course, I had horrible breathing problems. I was like short of breath all the time. I was like panting all the time, like really, really bad. And she tried to claim that I was probably 42 at the time. She tried to claim that the damage on my shins, the skin damage on my shins, was due to varicose veins, something that pops up in people in like their 70s and stuff, right? And I'm just like, what the hell are you talking about? Little did I know that was because I had so many infections, parasites crawling up my legs to go up in my orifices, in my mouth, and my nostrils, and things like that. And as they're crawling up the body, they're doing a lot of damage to my shins and my legs and all that on the skin. Ha. And then the best part is that I had severe explosive diarrhea for 6 months. 6 months. I go to see her and I'm like, doctor, I've had this diarrhea that just won't stop, and it's been going on for 6 months. She looks at me and she's like, well, it's better than constipation. I'm like, well, it's one way to look at it, right? Better than constipation. 6 months of explosive diarrhea with severe dehydration. And her response is not to offer any sort of treatments or any diagnostics and just say, well, diarrhea is better than constipation. Now, I'm not drawing any inferences here or anything, but I just want to point out that this doctor, Jewish. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. I'm sure all these Jews in the mental health field and in medicine that have denied my parasitic infections and have worsened my health problems. It's probably just total coincidence that they're all Jewish. And and then who else? I know I'm skipping over another doctor. Oh, my parents' neighbor who diagnosed me with delusional parasitosis in 2019. Yale trained, who didn't run any medical diagnostics, likely diagnosed me with delusional parasitosis in exchange for a piece of property where his patio sat on my parents' property that would have killed the value of his house if he didn't acquire that property. And I think there was a little trade there saying, hey, you diagnosed Greg with delusional parasitosis, you get that piece of property. Well, I don't want to make any firm conclusions here, but I just want to point out that this man, Jewish. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. I'm sure there's no there. All these people who've made my life very, very difficult. So since 2019, I have been flooded with parasites onto my skin day and night, all day and night. It's been nearly 7 years, day and night, nothing but constant parasitosis. It's like, wow. And then I've had run-ins with Mossad agents internationally and domestically. It's 2024 in Arizona. I had some run-ins, and here in Texas too, with some Mossad agents. I just find that really interesting. And then my life got really, really a lot more difficult when my sister started dating the man who became my brother-in-law. My sister's 7 years older than me. He must have entered the picture in like 1993 or 1994 when I was a sophomore or junior. It must have been 93 when I was a sophomore in college at Boston University, BU. Yeah, And he's always tried to frame me among the family and the community as mentally ill and drug addicted. At his wedding to where he got married to my sister in '97, I think it was, he was the one who started the rumor that Greg was on drugs, or Greg wasn't on drugs, and my whole family turned against me. Now, my sister converted when she married Eric, to Judaism. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. And I'm also sure it's just a coincidence that right after October 7th, 2 years ago, that he's a software engineer and pretty big in the tech field or whatever. He's got a pretty good name and stuff and career. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that he ended up going to Israel right after the October 7th attacks on Israel from Hamas, from the Gaza Strip. I'm sure he wasn't there for security reasons and intel and IT reasons, because that would mean he would be affiliated with the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces. No, I'm sure it's all just a coincidence. I'm sure all these Jewish Zionistic people in my life that have made my life very, very difficult. I'm sure all of them. I'm not reading into anything. I'm just saying that's all. It's a couple of Jews that have made my life a lot more difficult. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, though. But I do want to say there have been some great Jews that I've known in my life, and my nieces and nephew are great people, and they're Jewish, but yeah, it's the Jews who are intentionally making us sick. It's that are pushing a global depopulation agenda, and whoever survives the depopulation agenda becomes their slaves, the goyim. We're all meat, flesh to them, to the right wing, like crazy satanic ones, the Talmudic, Kabbalistic ones. And it's not every Jew, but it's a lot of them. It's not only the Jews, but it's mostly the Jews. It makes it very, very difficult to get justice. But I would wager that 99% of Jews that are either in research, in medicine, or in mental health care, addiction services, are part of the conspiracy, this Jewish supremacy conspiracy of global depopulation and eventual enslavement of all non-Jews. So, this is all for entertainment purposes only. I am not drawing any firm inferences. I'm just saying, just laying out a bit of my own personal history here. So, I'm really praying for divine justice. I'm really praying that those who intentionally make us sick with these parasite demons be held accountable and responsible. I don't want to get into what's going on in Israel right now. I'll create a whole nother video with that, and Gaza and the West Bank and all that other stuff, and how they're calling humanitarians. They're trying to provide relief and support to the people being genocided and the children being killed. They're labeling those humanitarians as terrorists, which is just killing journalists, killing doctors, medical professionals that are helping innocent Palestinian people, children. Again, just a coincidence maybe that they're all Jewish. But I don't know. I'm just saying a few things out loud while I can, Anyways, God bless, guys. Have a great day. Love you.